So this is a primer for what I call the arisings meditation. The technique here is we're going to ask a series of questions, right? Things like, what is the body? What is the mind? What is thought? What is breath? What are bones? What is sitting? Right? Any number of kind of things that come around the meditative experience, things that we'll know or encounter when we're sitting on a meditation cushion. And as those come, inevitably the mind likes to kind of chase them, right? Chase them, grab them, categorize them, put them together, right? This is what the mind does, right? Makes connections, categories, abstracts. What we want to do here is we kind of want to take it to what I think is kind of the ultimate abstraction, kind of the ultimate end of the road for thinking about experience, which is what I call arisings in awareness. Now, this is a phrase I've heard at various different times. I don't think it's attributable to any one source really. The idea though is if you want to break experience down to really its kind of core core elements, if you wanted to kind of describe kind of the E equals MC squared of experience, you may say arisings in awareness. Now, that doesn't necessarily sound right to us in our lived experience, right? I'm like, well, arisings in awareness. No, like here's a hand, right? Here's a solid hand, here's a solid board, right? Here's a solid being. So what we have is maybe a primate in a three-dimensional world, right? With breathable air, feelable body, nervous system, all those things, right? True enough. We also know though that state we have, maybe when we're just coming out of sleep into wakefulness, before our body has fully like kicked in, we're awake, we're aware, but we're not feeling our fingers and our toes the same way we do when we're exercising, right? I know I kind of feel like my body, it can be kind of like light and fuzzy in a way. And even my thoughts as they're coming through don't really have kind of a sharpness to them yet, don't have that kind of drive or focus I tend to have when I'm more kind of up and about doing my task-oriented focus in the world. They tend to be a little more drifty, a little softer around the edges. And especially if I'm having this moment with my eyes closed, I wouldn't, if I'm trying to build up from that experience and say, okay, well, what am I right now? Of course, I can acknowledge, hey, I'm a primate lying in a bed, coming out of a sleep state into a wakefulness state. My consciousness is kind of slowly coming on board. And as it does, it's becoming aware, oh, that's right, I have a body. Oh, that's right, I have a mind that's useful for practical purposes. And that's all true. I think at the bottom of it though, if we look at those two different things, right, that mind-body experience in the liminal state in bed, and then the mind-body experience of being up and tasking, it's really arisings in awareness, right? There's a field of awareness. I'm aware of things happening. I'm aware of things occurring and unfolding in time. And again, normally I ground it all through my body and my senses, but I know, right, when I dream, if you ingest certain chemicals up to a certain level, right, you can get a profoundly different experience in life, and yet you feel a continuity or a commonness through them all, right? I am the same being in bed and up, and on those chemicals and not, on this certain amount of sleep and not, right? There's something continuous to it, at least it seems that way, and yet those experiences are so profoundly different subjectively. And the continuity I think we can always find is there's always arisings in awareness. There's always awareness. And there's always information, right, or input that seems to be coming into the field of awareness and going out of the field of awareness, right? This thought comes up, has its time in and passes, right? This moment comes up, right? Engagement with the board, and it passes, right? And when I concretize things too quickly, right, or I conceptualize things too quickly in three-dimensional space, I confine my sense of self and my sense of existence to that. And again, it's not denying the realness of that conception, but it's recognizing that it doesn't really tell the whole story. And if we confine ourselves to that view, we really limit our self-conception and our ability to see ourselves as we really are, which really, I think, is closer to this notion of arisings in awareness. No matter what state we're in our existence, if we're existing, there's an awareness and there's information or input arising, right? We're not staring into the void. It's not blankness. There's something going on, and there's an awareness of it, and we're identifying with being the awareness of the occurrence. Okay, so in the technique, what we're doing is we're taking whatever thought comes to mind, right, in the meditation, and then we're answering arisings in awareness, right? So if I'm sitting here and I'm breathing, I can ask, what is breath? I can say arisings in awareness, right? I could say, what is a cushion? Arisings in awareness. I can get a little more abstract or conceptual, right? I could say, what is death? Arisings in awareness. What is birth? Arisings in awareness. What is the heart? Arisings in awareness. And especially if we're meditating with our eyes closed, especially if we're allowing ourselves to kind of break the normal thing we have, which is, thinking of ourselves as a physical body moving through space, thinking of ourselves in functional terms, right? What this can do, what this does, how this connects with this, how this serves this, right? We tend to think of things kind of schematically and strategically. This allows us to flex a different outlook or different approach to being, which is really sinking back into that pure field of awareness and noticing the arisings within it, recognizing and honoring everything that is arising within awareness. And we're not trying to necessarily achieve some kind of disembodied state or something like that, although we may find that we get more toward that the more we embrace this outlook. The purpose, again, is just to kind of train our mind again and again to not get stuck in certain modes of being. Again, we're not denying that certain framings are helpful. We're just saying those framings don't tell the whole story. And if I spend all my time or most of my time stuck in those framings, I'm not really going to get to grow and to experience the richness of life in its fullness. And so if I can flex to this other framing, right, and introduce that into my ecosystem, and if I do this meditation a lot, right, that's going to start coming up with me more organically, right, arisings in awareness. The more that that's in the mix of things, the more I can kind of break my entrancement with only thinking of myself in functional terms, and I can really think of myself more in essential terms. What am I at my core? What am I always? What am I unfailingly, right? Arisings in awareness is a pretty good answer to that question. And so if in that meditation technique, whatever thought or curiosity is arising, I say, well, what is it? And I answer arisings in awareness, right? And I just let that be, right? And then different things will start kind of popcorning up, different thoughts will happen. We can just choose at our pace and our leisure. We can have a script of ones we go through in advance. We can allow it to happen as it goes. The key is I just ask, well, what is it? And I answer arisings in awareness. Just want to introduce briefly a few kind of concepts or thoughts behind this. So one would be, again, in my metacosmology, you have here the physical being, right? Me standing in front of you in physical time and space, appearing on camera. I would be represented by this lowercase I. Spirit is a level above that. It's essentially the kind of divine level of being that is creating the entirety of this experience for me. God is kind of, I have my spirit, right? You have your spirit. Everyone's got their spirits. I believe everything has its spirit. All of those are essentially facets or aspects of God, right? So you could think of God as kind of like a big disco ball, and all the spirits are kind of like all the individual mirrors patterned around it. All different aspects or facets of the same common thing, right? That's what God is. And then oneness, in Buddhism, they call it emptiness, right? It's a state of non-material, non-being, state of pure potential from which all that arises. I think the key here is this arisings in awareness even works at this level of oneness where either manifestation is arising or the potential, the thought or the possibility of manifestation is arising. I think we have the truth of arisings in awareness existing at all these levels. And so if in our meditation, our consciousness is moving between these different levels of existence, which I think it does all the time. I just think we're deconditioned to noticing or realizing what it is. When we're saying arisings in awareness, I think we're making a statement that's true and valid and resonates with all the levels at which our consciousness could be. Because at this level, all you really have is arisings in awareness. It's only when you get really down here that you start to feel deeply immersed and entrenched in this more functional, spatial notion of things, thinking of everything as I and you, right? Pronouns, dimensions, degrees, distance, all those things, as opposed to think of it almost as a 0-point field of awareness in which arisings are kind of just coming and going, almost more like kind of images or clouds across the sky, something like that. Now, this, of course, is kind of my metacosmology. It may not be something that you buy into. Again, up until about 3 years ago, I didn't buy into much of this either. So another thing you could do is you could think of it more as the field of the open heart, right? The brain is what wants to kind of chunk everything up, right? Organize it, categorize it. This does that. This does this. This is good. This is bad. This helps me for this purpose. This helps me for this purpose. Again, it's an evolved organ inside of a primate That's the product of natural selection and evolution. Of course it does that, right? It's designed to essentially get my genes into the next generation, and this is the design that has evolved over the course of time, many countless generations, fine-tuning it to strike just the right balance with all the other systems in my body to get me through. But what I got to recognize is that's a functional tool, right? To serve the genes. It doesn't serve my well-being necessarily, right? It doesn't necessarily serve me in life. It's the genes serving the genes, right? And that's an expression that occurs here. So that's why if I get too caught up in that way of thinking of everything as either a benefit or a detriment, how can this hurt me? How can this help me? Right? This kind of selfish view. I don't mean selfish in like a moral sense, good or bad. I just mean like literally, I just keep thinking about, does this help me or does this hurt me? I'm thinking of everything in terms of myself. It kind of locks me into that way of thinking, coils me around it. Now a lot of my emotions are programmed to that. I'll have a negative or even disgust reaction to something that seems like a threat to me. Instead of what I would really want, which is an open field of awareness that's taking all the information in. And that doesn't mean I just sit here and naively, see a tiger coming and I go, oh, the tiger is an expression of what I am, and I go and stick its head in my mouth. Of course, I can do that if I want to, but if I want to stay alive, instead of immediately going, okay, tiger, bad, wrong, shut down, move away, right? I can have that tiger arising in awareness, right? What else is arising in awareness? All my thoughts and feelings about it. What else is arising in awareness? I notice I'm actually instinctively moving away. Do I want to stop that? I notice that thought arising, right? So it's really more of a fluid field of information going, instead of the brain chunking everything right away into good or bad, right or wrong, and then essentially having a fear response. And so I think my point here is when you use arisings and awareness as your framing, you really allow yourself to go from a brain self-focused approach to more of an open-hearted, open field approach that's more accepting of everything that arises, right? More embracing of everything that arises. And it's not pretending that everything is equally satisfactory to us, right, or equally unsatisfactory to us. We're just recognizing that the satisfactoriness or the unsatisfactoriness is actually also something arising in that field, right? The tiger shows up, boom, a wave of unsatisfactoriness arises with it. In real time, that's going to have us behave a certain way. But if on the meditation cushion, we get to have the experience of kind of our inner tigers arising, and then we also see that huge wave of unsatisfactoriness, maybe disgust, fear, associations with the past, right, arising with it, the meditation cushion is where we can keep our poise, right, and not panic, not necessarily go into a fear mode, but keep that open field of awareness and then see what comes next. Maybe there's a storm of negativity that surges for 10 or 20 or 30 seconds, but then it passes and quells. And if we've kept an open field of awareness, right, then we could see arising 1, the tiger. We could see arising 2, our negative response, but then we could see arising 3, which is kind of a move back toward a neutrality. Right? And what we can start to recognize is the broader we can have our awareness, the more we allow those arisings to come and go without letting us tilt too much into one direction of either maybe kind of a naively loving and accepting thing. Oh, this is all good. This is so good. Oh, thank you. Or, oh God, this is all bad. This is all terrible. Get away, right? This is infatuation. This is aversion, right? What's the Buddha all about? The middle way. The middle way is keeping that poise where as these arisings come up, we acknowledge them, right? We acknowledge our reactions, but we recognize that our reactions too are arisings in awareness. And the more we can do that, we can get out of this brain and self-focused approach to things and usher in this other approach. And again, it's not like we're trying to do is draw a line between these two and say, this is the good one and this is the bad one, right? That's the same game here. What we're trying to do is have balance. We're trying to recognize, hey, look, this serves its purposes, this brain focus, right? It may keep me alive, especially in difficult survival situations. It'll kick in instincts that'll move more quickly than I can, perhaps from this contemplative state. But what I can also recognize is that if I can keep the contemplative state open, keep that open field of heart awareness open while the brain is operating, I can actually get better information and more information and keep more of a poise instead of having a biased and limited approach to the situation. This allows me to be more adaptable, allows me to be more flexible, more creative, more responsive to the moment instead of reactive to the moment. So anyway, that's all a way to say that arisings and awareness, it's a relatively simple technique, but I do think there's a lot going on beneath the surface to it. And I think the main practical benefit you're going to find if you use it is that more and more time throughout your day away from the meditation cushion, You're going to have the ability to conceive of yourself and of your reality in less strictly functional terms and really more in terms of its essence or its nature, which is arisings in awareness. And you can really go down to the bottom with this and try to find like what isn't an arising in awareness, what couldn't be fairly characterized as arising in awareness. And I think as you go down that, you'll kind of find that there's a certain limit of analytical thought, a certain limit of conceptuality, and yet you can still exist beyond that limit. You can still contemplate and think beyond that limit. You may not have statements or thoughts anymore, but you can still exist and you can still feel some kind of mental machinery operating. And that, I think, there's this term negative capability, which the poet John Keats talked about, where essentially you're in a state of contemplation, but you're not grasping for formulations or statements of what you're thinking. You're not trying to find some formula or some rule. You're really just allowing yourself to be in that open space to allow things to come to you. And I think this is where deep creativity, deep discoveries, deep insights can occur when you kind of get to the limit of your ability to characterize things. You let the characterization go, but you let yourself stay open. This is where I think inspiration can come. This is where I think miracles can come. It's where growth can come. I like to call it the state of decognition. It's really a beautiful and powerful state. It's also a state of relaxation. You can kind of get out of the chatter and the cycling of the mind. And so I hope that this arisings in awareness technique brings that for you.